Good afternoon. This is Gary Jones. You're listening to the UK Genesis podcast. It's episode number 15 that we're up to. So this is a show that likes to introduce web professionals from the UK who use the Genesis framework. My co-host today is Joe. Hi, Joe.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thanks.
Are you in your fancy new office today?
I am in my fancy new office, which looks a little bit too much like a prison cell from here, but yeah.
Can you give us a quick tour of your office?
Oh, goodness me, I'm on an iMac, Gary. I'm going to have to move the whole damn thing around. I don't think there's much to see. Yeah, so you've got the other desk, and, well, I would turn you around to show you Leanne, but she's also on an iMac. Hang on, I don't think you're going to see anything much more. Are you going to see much more? Gary, come in and say hello. I can't.
Give us a wave, Leanne.
I'm going. I'm going to pull the power cable out the back of the iMac if I twist it any further.
Just to cause chaos this afternoon even. Yeah, and so our guest today is Craig Simpson. How are you doing, Craig?
I'm good, thanks, Gary. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Gary and Joe. It's a pleasure. I've watched all 15 so far, so very pleased to be asked.
Excellent. More than welcome to come on. So if you want to ask Craig any questions, then put your questions onto Twitter is the easiest way that we'll see them. If you put it onto the UK Genesis hashtag, or include that hashtag, if you put it to @UKGenesis, if you don't want to kind of tweet it to the rest of your followers, then that would be great as well. So for those who don't know about you, Craig, and I have to say I know you very well, in terms of kind of working together. But for those who don't know you, can you give us an introduction of what your specialisms are, where you are, and so on?
Okay, I'm primarily involved in WordPress development, obviously, Genesis themes. I'm based in the very northeast tip of Scotland, in Fraserburgh, which is about an hour north of Aberdeen. It's quite a prominent fishing port, one of the largest in Europe, I believe. And sort of for the past maybe 15 years, I guess, I've been developing websites in one form or another, and only in the past sort of 2 to 3 have I been sort of doing it to a professional level, and I guess that's why we're here today. Isn't it?
And who do you mainly build websites for?
So for the past year or so, I've been working quite closely with a local IT support company, who have quite a large portfolio of websites, nobody to manage them, which is sort of where I fit in. So they provide some web hosting and have built sort of rudimentary websites for a lot of their IT support clients. And I've sort of come on board and tried to ratify everything, move everything over to a consistent platform, which has been WordPress, and put in place certain sort of processes and ways of working to make things a little easier. At the moment, I think there are about 200 clients on hosting packages, half of which have websites, and maybe only 10 of those are WordPress at the moment. So it's been a case of working through and trying to offer support where I can and convert certain websites over to.
That sounds quite a big job, having so many sites to convert through.
It's made sort of more challenging by the fact everyone's different. So there's some Drupal sites, some Joomla sites, some static sites, some that use little bits of Flash here and there, which is ridiculous. But yeah, it's been quite a big undertaking, to be honest.
So are you converting them all into WordPress then, or you're just supporting those that aren't WordPress?
Sort of as and when. So if the company's been proactively looking to have a better website than perhaps a static website or the Drupal website they have at the moment, then we'd be shifting them over to WordPress. A lot of the time, we've sort of brought in graphic design and branding elements as well, but primarily my role has been managing the project, working on the code and the theme, and then delivering whatever training and ongoing support is required after that.
Okay. And do you do work with anyone else outside of that business that you're subcontracting for?
Yeah, I've been working with Gary on a couple of projects recently, and some other bits and pieces above and beyond that too. So just as and when opportunities come up, really. I'm not proactively looking for any freelance work because I've got a decent amount of work on at the moment. But if something comes up, if I'm in conversation with someone on Slack, for example, and an opportunity is there, I'm happy to step in and help if I can.
Yeah. You've been very helpful on Slack to a number of people I know. We really value your contribution.
Interesting. As sad as it is, if something's there, a little question that I think, oh, I could probably work that out. Give me 5 minutes and I'll have a go.
Yeah.
It's all a good experience. I like the interaction as well.
And we were just discussing before we came on air about your lack of a website. Tell us about that.
I mean, the position I'm in at the moment is that the IT support business have enough websites that I wouldn't need any further advertising my work for quite some time. I've got a blog online which is at design2.co.uk, but that's more really to put snippets of code and thoughts about certain tools and workflow stuff, and not so much business.
That's more of an audience for other developers rather than prospective clients.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah. I mean, a lot of the work I enjoy doing most, and what I'd probably be most interested in doing, is just the theme development side. So rather than going out and snaring customers from businesses locally or whoever, it sort of appeals to me more to work with a designer who can come up with something really nice visually, and I would then just build out the back end or develop the theme.
So are you looking for more work to subcontract with other agencies then?
It's not something I'd rule out. I mean, if I had availability and something interesting came along, then perhaps. But
do you prefer working with other professionals, designers, developers, rather than end clients?
It's a better and a sort of more defined process for me, I think. It means that I know exactly what I need to do rather than having to juggle different people and yeah, I prefer just a sort of working with a professional designer who knows to deliver, say, a PDF or an Illustrator file with views at different screen sizes or whatever. It makes life easier. Certainly.
Okay. So Gary, how's your new website coming on? Talking about developers with no websites.
Yes, we as Joe said, we were talking about this just before we came on air, and I said that yeah, my website, I've had a design done for 10 months, something like that, and just haven't put it live yet. For me, and one of the reasons why I asked the question of Craig is that I do prefer work with other designers and developers. Slight odd situation at the moment in that I have my main task at the moment is one end client rather than kind of subcontracting or doing code audits and theme reviews and so on for others. But the website, the lack of a website isn't, I don't feel, is hindering me at the moment because I'm not actively marketing, shall we say, not actively kind of looking for work. So in that respect, it'll get done when it gets done. I did try and do a little bit more of it this week, but it's not a high priority for me. I know that other people, their website as a web development freelancer or agency is obviously their number one marketing. They've got their portfolio on there, they've got their list of services. For me personally, I tend to be more word of mouth, and therefore a lack of a website is almost kind of good in some ways, because the word of mouth that goes around, people know me for the reputation, good, bad, or otherwise, that I might have in that word of mouth that's been passed on. So if it's just somebody kind of random to come into a website and they don't know me, then that's fine. I'm not necessarily looking for their work anyway. I want somebody who knows my reputation and still comes to me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so it'd be interesting to know from the viewers and stuff like that, how many of you think it's important that a web developer has their own website? I know that when I rebranded to Kalia Web, it was a year before I got around to sorting out my own website, and then I just threw something up quite quickly. And recently I've redone our own website, and it's really hard work to do it for yourself. And it actually has quite a significant change on the type of inquiries that we've been receiving. So it's quite an interesting. It's just something that I'm sort of finding interesting to follow through at the moment.
Change in what way?
The inquiries. Well, before I was getting a lot of people who were sort of freelancers themselves, so single person businesses contacting us, a lot of bloggers contacting us, and now that I've changed it to be slightly more that, you know, we're a small we're a small agency, I'm getting inquiries from lots of different slightly bigger businesses and stuff like that. Not corporates, but sort of 5 to 10 man people companies and so on. So that's been interesting.
Craig is talking about kind of small agencies. Are you happy kind of freelancer, or would you like to see you potentially grow big enough to be an agency? And what's your plans for the kind of the next 12 months, 2 years?
Yeah, I would say I'm happy as I am for the moment. I think I quite like the fact that at the moment I really have one specific task, one purpose that's developing a theme, for example. I don't know how comfortable I'd be sort of being the person that has to go out and generate work to keep other people in employment and to keep enough money coming in to do that. And obviously it's one of these things that you have to start planning for and sort of grow organically, really. But at the moment I'm happy as I am.
How long have you been freelancing?
So probably about 3 years, I would say, 2 to 3 years.
And what were you doing before that?
Before that, I was actually I've worked for an energy company doing engineering work before that. So it was to do with the rollout of the new smart meters, if you know about those.
Oh, okay.
Gas meters. But the web design and development has always been sort of my passion. So I'd go out and work all day, and then in the evenings or at night, I'd be working away on web stuff and learning more about things. So ultimately, my aim was to make that the sort of full-time occupation, which is what's happened now. But it's been a long process, and it's not happened overnight. Like I said earlier, I started building websites when I was still in high school, actually, which is quite a while ago now. But at that time, I mean, I had some sort of Saturday work at a local company doing that and bits and pieces in my spare time. But it's always been something I've been really passionate about. The first websites I built, I can remember quite well, using transparent GIF files and spacing things out with these transparent GIFs. Strange days, but yeah, a good experience as well, because it's experience like that. Obviously, you don't do that anymore, and I can see the sort of logic and reason why, having done it that way in the past, how things have progressed.
So you're talking about working on things in your spare time. Are you developing some free Genesis themes?
I am. I'm working on a couple of themes at the moment. It's one of those things, though, that it's sort of on the back burner, and as and when I have time to do that. For the most part, I like quite a minimal and simple style, so they should be ready in the next, hopefully, the end of this, the end of September. Sorry, will be the launch of the first one. But I'm probably going to look at reworking them slightly to include all of the accessibility features which are being released as part of 2.2. A lot of the work I've been doing in the past month to 6 weeks has been based on the RC1 under it and RC2, and just bringing everything up to that sort of level where all the accessibility options are turned on and active, and sort of making more of that.
We got a question from Jackie here. She says, how do you keep up to date with the latest development trends?
A lot of the time it's reading blogs and articles and keeping on top of the industry in that way. I listen to a number of podcasts which I find invaluable often.
What podcasts?
And which is your favourite?
A loaded question, isn't it? I enjoy UK Genesis, obviously, but I like more sort of general design and industry podcasts. So I like Unfinished Business, which I think one of your previous guests had mentioned. I enjoy the Sean West podcast. I don't know if you've heard of that one. It's an American one, primarily typography, but a lot of illustration and graphic design, and quite a lot of really good stuff about business and sort of building a business as well. A couple of others. Apply Filters has been quite good in the past. I've enjoyed listening to that, and also 3 Devs and a Maybe, which is a sort of PHP based one. It's quite
Could you tweet those kind of links to those after the show? Yeah, no need to do them now, but
Yeah.
helpful for people to be able to follow up. And so if you want to follow or get those links, if you follow Craig on Twitter, his handle is at Craig Simps, SIMPS, is like a shortened version of Simpson. So if you follow him there, you'll be able to get hold of those links.
So if you're working for one main client, do you go to the effort of tracking your time? Do you invoice hourly, or how do you manage all the financial side of it?
For that particular client, no. I'm just quite sort of, their office is just up the road, so it's a 5-minute walk to go in and work in the office with them. In terms of other work, I've been using Pancake app, which I've not heard mentioned on the podcast before. Pancakeapp.com, yeah, it's a self-hosted invoicing, proposals, time tracking, project management. It's built on CodeIgniter in PHP, so it's been nice and easy for me to add my own customizations and work on that. But it's really handy because it's a sort of all-in-one solution that's under my control as well.
That looks interesting. I have to give that one a bit of a look later. I'm always looking at different ones. It's a bit of a...
It's good in that it takes the whole process under its umbrella, so you can create a proposal in there which can be accepted and move on to a project, which can then generate line items that you can run a timer against, for example, to create an invoice later on. It's a really nice solution, and it's quite easy to use as well because it's CodeIgniter based, which is quite good to work with.
I'll have to definitely have a look at that one then. Okay.
I did get on board quite early with that though, so I got a good discount and upgrade into the latest version, so I'm not sure what the cost is now.
I'm having a good shout out now. Okay.
Do you work from home, or have you got an office?
I've got an office in my home and also work out of the office as well sometimes. My primary workstation is in my home office, which is a Mac Mini with a couple of monitors and stuff. But I've got a little MacBook which I put under my arm and work wherever I need to do. A lot of the time with the IT support business, I've been in their office and working at a desk there. But I've also been out side by side with the client working on something with both sets of eyes on and sort of tweaking and making changes in that way.
Would you ever... sorry.
Go ahead.
Would you ever consider going back to being an employee in another company, or are you really wanting to be freelance now?
I don't see why not. I wouldn't rule it out. It would need to be the right opportunity, though I'd be quite selective about it. I think that there are a lot of really good companies that would be excellent to work for, actually. I quite like the idea of working remotely, but I think in terms of web agencies locally, it's quite a small area. In Aberdeen, there are a couple of larger agencies, but again, that would mean an hour's commute, which I wouldn't be too enamoured by, to be honest.
Yeah, I must admit, the commute is one of the reasons why I'm quite glad I'm self-employed, is I just don't have to do it. And my new office is now just a 5-minute walk from my house, so it's quite nice.
I do use sort of remote desktop apps and things as well, so a lot of the time if it's a call or a support request or whatever, it might be just a screen share for things that way. So I find that quite a lot easier than sort of 10 emails back and forth to get to the root of a problem. We can just have a quick sort of screen share and fix it up.
Okay, another question from Jackie. What development tools do you use on a daily basis and why?
I spend most of my time in Sublime Text, Sublime Text 3. The Creative Cloud Suite's obviously one of the ones I use every day. SourceTree is always open, and Dash as well, and probably a terminal window or two open as well. So I think that about covers it really.
I was reading the blurb on the UK Genesis website about your about this podcast today, and it says topics we may cover is building lean focused themes for clients and using Bourbon and Neat and Foundation and Bootstrap, using automation, Gulp task runner, and version control and deployment using Neat. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not really sure what I can ask you about those because I don't really use any of those.
A lot of them I do. I mean, especially when it's converting like a static site over to WordPress or something like that. It'll have quite well-defined content structure, so everything will be there as a template already for different content areas. So a lot of what I mean by creating a lean theme is that typically it'll be built exactly for the purpose of that client's website. So if I'm using, for example, advanced custom fields to create custom content areas, it's going to be built really specifically, and it's not really a theme that could then be made available to the public. It's a really focused and specific purpose, and it fits that client perfectly.
Mm.
And I mean, the topics you mentioned there, bourbon and neat, there's been quite a massive rise in frameworks and things like Bootstrap and Foundation. And bourbon and neat, it's a combination that I happened upon probably maybe 6 months ago now. But essentially, it uses the tools and the combination of mix-ins and features for SaaS, but without the overhead of having to load a large framework like Bootstrap or Foundation. So you would include Bourbon and Neat in your project, but when your SaaS is compiled, it only uses the helpers that you've included. So if we're thinking about a client site, instead of having to load 100 kilobytes of Bootstrap JavaScript, I've perhaps only got 2 or 3 kilobytes of that, and the CSS framework file doesn't really factor in because it's only pulling in essential items that are making up that theme. And I don't know if that made a lot of sense.
I think one of the main differences, or to paraphrase Craig there, is that with Bootstrap, there's various let's step back a bit. There's various sister products that goes with Bourbon. So you've got Bourbon, which is kind of the mix-ins and the includes, and then you've got Neat, which is kind of the grid styling, and then you've got I forgot to remember what the next one is. Refills, is that the next one?
Refills, yeah, and bitters as well.
Refills and bitters. So bitter, I can't remember which way around it is now. Which is which?
Bitters is the sort of baseline typography and styling. Yep. And refills
is the components.
Yeah.
So bitters, if you imagine kind of Bourbon, Neat, and bitters, you get something that is approaching Bootstrap in that it's very opinionated. It suggests styles. You can obviously still change them, but that is kind of a predefined styling, which is what you kind of get with Bootstrap. Which is why when you go to a kind of certain website, you say, well, I can instantly see this has been built with Bootstrap because it's the same kind of rounded edges, it's the same look of buttons, and so on. So by just using Bourbon Neat, you don't have all that opinionated stuff that the refills bit gives you that would match kind of the Bootstrap, and so it's much less code because you could have included all of Bourbon and all of Neat, and I think the only outputs, even if you did nothing else, just by importing those with your SaaS is about 10 lines of code or something like that, just some aspect of Neat. Bourbon itself does not actually output anything if you don't ask it.
Something like Neat as well, which is a sort of grid framework, is that we're using Bootstrap to define different widths at sort of mobile, tablet, and desktop. You might have to include 4 or 5 styles, where using Neat, you would only target the element itself, and you can then have those changes in your CSS rather than having to load 4 classes in your HTML.
Yep, so it keeps your markup clean as well. And
semantic way of doing it, yeah, it's a much more.
And when you've got something that is as defined as, say, Genesis on WordPress, where the classes are already there, and you can change most of them, if not all of them, but it's kind of extra PHP work, you can instantly kind of slot Neat and Bourbon into it, whereas if you're using Bootstrap, you need to kind of go along and filter and change how Genesis outputs just to be able to get the class that Bootstrap says you must use for your grid.
I would agree. It's a much better fit for Genesis than trying to shoehorn in something like Bootstrap or Foundation, where you've a lot of overhead and you've also then got to customize your PHP to include all the various classes and load everything correctly.
So do you have a starter theme that you use then for where you're building sites for clients that have already got the Bourbon and Neat included?
I do, but it's basically just blank. it's nothing. There's a functions file which has got all of my code in there that I might reuse, so removing certain parts, adding certain parts, loading style sheets and jQuery files and whatever. But the style sheet itself literally has placeholders for various partials that I would include as part of the Sass build, and basically just the sort of reset CSS, and then the first sort of 30 lines off the HTML5 boilerplate, which basically just brings in some really default styles. Everything from then on is custom, really. Whether it's building a site that is visually similar to a current website that's just been ported over, or whether it's working from a PSD and building something like that.
Does your starter theme include some of the automation that we mentioned, either with Grunt or Gulp?
Yeah, I use Gulp rather than Grunt, and I've got a few different sort of routines in there. So day to day in development, it would literally be to only compile my Sass, maybe optimize images, and then on run of the final build would be where scripts are combined into a library file, for example. And if I've installed anything using Bower, it may be copied over to a standalone directory to utilize in the feed. But Gulp's something that I've started using maybe in the past 7 or 8 months, and it's a real chore when I do something without it now. It's become a real sort of part of how I work on projects.
Any particular reason that you chose Gulp rather than Grunt?
It just happened to be a really good tutorial at the time, to be honest. That's the only thing. I did use Grunt previously, and I know there have been quite a lot of discussions about the difference in terms of streaming the files and how Grunt works as well. I can't say I noticed a huge difference in switching, but maybe I wasn't doing sort of the heavier tasks that would mean a larger difference in that respect.
Yeah, I was only talking today with Alan Schlesser, and he's got his new MacBook Pro today, or this morning, yesterday, and he said, yeah, you've kind of run a certain Grunt configuration and something that is very similar in Gulp, and he said that actually there wasn't that much between them because the disk access, which is kind of one of the things that supposedly Grunt is slower on because it's writing to a temporary file and then grabbing that file and writing to another temporary file or another file, whereas Gulp just kind of streams and pipes all the content from one task to another. He said actually with the fast disk access, that wasn't a bottleneck, and kind of CPU just became the bottleneck, so there's very little difference in practical terms.
I found Gulp to be quite friendly in terms of setup, though. It's been quite easy to create my different routines and build the Gulp file. When I was using Grunt, perhaps it wasn't as complex and I wasn't quite as deep into it as I am now with Gulp. It would be interesting to see what the differences are. After using Gulp at the moment. And as part of that as well, using browser sync has been a revelation, to be honest. From using live reload previously and moving over to browser sync with that, it's fantastic when demonstrating something to a client. You can have them load the website on their mobile, on their tablet, or on their computer within the local network, for example. And then I would just click through and demonstrate this is how the form works, fill it in, and it happens on screen as well. It's great for using to demonstrate stuff like that.
And can you one of the things we also mentioned is kind of version control and deployment using Meet?
Yeah, so especially when working with the IT support company, having 100 websites in a map network drive and using FTP, it's not ideal. So what we've been doing is using a system called Meet, which is available for free at getmeet.io, and it's a version control tool which you can self-host. So it's set up on a server in the local area network, and we can push changes to the version control system there. And it also includes automatic releases and deployment so that you can have the change instantly be reflected on the live site if necessary. But the basic version control system was something that we really had to implement really quickly just to get everything tracked and making sense when we come back to edit it later as well.
Do you put your generated? I know we're getting quite technical now, but do you put your generated files into your version control? So, for instance, you've got your Sass and you generate your style.css. Do you include that in your version control, even though it's a generated file?
Yeah, we have been for the simple reason of making deployment really easy in that case. So, the build files would generally be on my computer. I would then push the changes to the version control system, and then it would carry out an automatic release, which then pushes it all live. The only caveat with that is obviously we need to have database synchronization there as well. So there's a plugin on either end which handles that. So that changes locally, I would push the version control and then push the database to the live site as well. Keep everything in sync. And likewise, if I was then working on it after that, I could easily pull the database locally from the live site too.
What are you using for the database syncing?
It's WP Migrate DB Pro.
Okay.
So Jackie asks, do you? Sorry, not Jackie. Angie. Jackie's also got a question as well. We'll do Angie's question first. Angie asks, do you offer SEO services?
Simple answer is no. On existing websites, if I'm porting them over, I might make some suggestions that would improve things, and I might undertake those. But it's not something I'd offer standalone. It would be as part of an overall project.
Thank you. And then Jackie says, you mentioned Sublime Text. Which package do you use for formatting your PHP code, and how should we be formatting it?
I don't have a package that formats it, I'm afraid. I type it, and then if the code sniffer tells me it needs formatted a different way, then I correct it. I have a couple of packages that help me with highlighting sort of code sniffs, and I use HTML tidy and CSS tidy as well. But for the most part, it's a case of writing it as best I can and then sort of checking over it, and all the little red icons in the gutter mean that I need to make a change.
Yeah, there's a couple of packages. One is, I think it is called PHPCS for Sublime. Another one is Sublime Linter, which then includes
that I've got installed, and I've got a few of the various the SAS one, PHP CS one.
Yeah, Sublime Linter is like one package, but then you can get kind of sub packages for PHP or for your SAS or for your CSS and so on. So that tends to be quite a popular one that you can.
Really easy to set up as well. I'd say as long as everything's installed in the system first. But yeah, it's plug and play for the most part.
And then for those who don't know, PHPCS, PHP Code Sniffer, is like a command line tool that you can use. And then there's something called the WordPress Coding Standards sniffs, which are on GitHub, and that tells the code sniffer how something should be formatted. So whether there should be a space here, whether they should be on the next line, whether you're using kind of deprecated functions, whether you're escaping correctly, and each of those sniffs, each of those checks are organized by whether it's kind of WordPress core, WordPress extra, WordPress VIP, because some people want to be extra kind of strict to that, and there's another one as well which I can't remember, but it's all kind of part of that, and you can pick and choose kind of which rules you want, or just say I want all of them, and you can get that on GitHub or download it and kind of pass the configuration through to PHPCS, and that will check it, and you can do that on command line. But what we're saying here is that Sublime Linter will allow you, will kind of every time you save the file, every time you make change to the file within Sublime Text, it will kind of effectively run that in the background and highlight with a kind of a red dot and a marker to say, hey, this isn't to WordPress coding standards.
It tells you why as well. It gives you that you might have your conditional around the wrong way, or you might.
Yep, you have the conditions. Yep.
Yeah.
And those WordPress coding standards, in terms of knowing how it should be formatted, on the make.wordpress.org site, if you go into the core handbook best practices coding standards for PHP, there's a list there of how things kind of should be coded for PHP. There's equivalent ones for JavaScript and CSS, and there's a separate one for PHP documentation and JavaScript documentation as well. So the Make WordPress core handbook is the best place to knowing how your code should be formatted.
And I mean, from my point of view, the themes that I'm building aren't for public use and won't be distributed, but I still like everything to be a nice high standard and to follow best practices, not just for me, but in the case that someone else might need to work on that after I've finished, or someone else might inherit it. It just makes things easier if everything's up to that same sort of high standard.
Cool. Okay, so we're just over halfway through the show now. So if anybody's got any more questions for Craig, hit us up on Twitter, UK Genesis hashtag. Let's have a change of questions now. Have you ever been to a WordCamp?
No, I have noticed that Edinburgh is going to be coming up later on this year, so I'm going to do my very best to make it to there, but I haven't been to one previously.
Is there any particular reason why you haven't?
Not really. I mean, a lot of the only one that's local and that would be within easy travelling is the Edinburgh one, but that's probably still 4 or 5 hours by car. Um, I'm not sure if I would fly somewhere to go to WordCamp. I don't know. I'm committed enough that I probably would if I thought long enough about it, because I know they're a fantastic opportunity. But so far, I've not sort of ventured.
So it's more kind of the fact you're out in the middle of nowhere, effectively.
I'm quite isolated up here. Yeah, there's not a lot of WordPress community in this area. I know there are a couple of people locally, but
So there's no local meetups at all or anything. There's no Aberdeen WordPress meetup or anything.
something that I've thought about, if I could wrangle enough people together that it might be worth making it happen, because there must be a good number of people in the Aberdeen area and certainly around that area who are using WordPress. But it would be quite an undertaking to make that happen, I think.
Yeah. So is that why the Slack group is really good for you? So these virtual communities.
Yeah. Especially in terms of Genesis, because having a group of people that you can bounce ideas off really quickly and really easily has been fantastic. In terms of Genesis users locally, the only sites I've seen are ones that I've built, so I don't know too many of them.
In terms of setting up, I think it's a monthly Word Up Edinburgh that I think they might have as well. In terms of setting up a new group, I know the Richard Senior iFamily is kind of in the middle of setting one up for Bournemouth. So if you speak to him, he might have some ideas or contacts about who to speak to get kind of support for it, because I think there is the WordPress Foundation do have support for like paying like meetup.com fees and someone like that to help logistics. Speak to him. Okay, should we do the quick fire round?
Hey, who's firing the questions, Gary?
Let Craig. Who would you like to fire the questions at you?
Let's have Joe then.
Okay. So what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be an architect, funnily enough. Never came to anything. But I quickly got into IT and computers as well, so that kind of shifted focus a wee bit. I remember my first computer as an Amiga 500. So
that drew you away from a life of architect.
Yeah. It sort of drew me in and it's never let go.
And do you use a Mac or a PC?
I use a Mac.
And what code editor you use? We already know that one.
Although at the time I was stuck with Coda, so I wouldn't move away from Coda. Basically through my own stubbornness, I think. But I also had a lot invested in it in terms of code snippets and various pieces of code, which I didn't really want to have to leave. But moving to Sublime Text has been great.
And how do you manage your code snippets now?
Dash for Mac.
Oh yeah. And what do you use for localhost?
I use Vagrant and I use VVV.
Oh. And what do you use to deploy sites?
In terms of version control and deployment is Meet, getmeet.io. I'm not sure if you can download it straight away, but if anyone wants an invitation, I've got quite a few.
Okay. And what do you use for designs and wireframes and mock-ups, or do you not do them? You always work with a designer?
A lot of the time I use Photoshop, and I know that there have been quite a lot of sort of discussions about working in the browser and developing in the browser. And I always feel that when I do that, everything sort of follows the same pattern and works out looking the same. And I guess that's because of me, because when I'm working in the browser, I kind of take the path of least resistance, really, and if I know how to code something one way, that's the way it gets coded. Whereas working in Photoshop, it's much more visual, and it means that I can sort of create something that's a bit more unique.
Do you sometimes look at something you've designed and think, uh-oh, so how am I going to develop that now?
Sometimes, but it's a challenge, isn't it? And a lot of the time working with a designer, I've had PSDs and PDFs that I've looked at and just thought, what the hell am I going to do with that? But you find a way.
Yeah.
One of the great satisfaction of doing this job is that nothing's impossible, really. You can sort of find a way around any problem.
Okay, I know who to outsource to if I get an issue, which it would be in my impossible section. I'll give you a call. Okay. What are your must-have plugins?
So I use main WP, and that's probably one of the first plugins that gets installed. WP Migrate DB Pro as well. I think I would probably have said Gravity Forms up till maybe a month ago when I started using Caldera Forms, and that's been quite a good step change there.
There's been quite a lot of discussion about that and Ninja Forms in Slack, hasn't there?
Yeah, I've not tried Ninja Forms other than sort of playing with it for 5 minutes, but using Caldera it seems quite good. But then I'm sort of the problem I have with Gravity Forms is that it's such a pain to style without removing all their styles and adding in my own. And then with Caldera, you've got the sort of overhead again, the Bootstrap grid using forms. I'm in two minds over that. But essential plugins, yeah, probably the ones I've outlined. The developer pack as well, so with Query Monitor and the various developer tools is one of my must-haves as well.
And do you have any public themes or public plugins that are in the repo?
Not at the moment, no. I had one launched in 2013 or maybe 2014, maybe somewhere between. But that was released for a little while and I pulled it. But like I said earlier, I'm working on a couple at the moment which should be available in the next month or 6 weeks, depending on how things go.
Well, do tell us when they're available and we'll give you a tweet out. What do you think of the customizer?
At the moment, I've not really given it a fair chance, I don't think. I'm not a massive anti-customizer person, but I've not used it enough to give you an informed opinion, I'm afraid. In terms of clients using the websites that I've built, I would rather that options were kept within sort of page views or within defined areas, and I don't think I'd be too happy if a customer jumped into the customizer and was tweaking colours and moving things around. In terms of building menus and things in the customizer, I'm not a big fan of how that works. I think it could be optimised quite a lot.
And how would you like to see WordPress changing over the next 5 years?
I think, from my point of view, I think that a lot of the work I do with WordPress at the moment, it needs the sort of the more app-based setup that something like Bedrock has, where WordPress core is perhaps like a dependency that's updated as and when WordPress is updated, rather than having to rely on a client or me to go in and make these sort of critical security updates. I think perhaps having core perhaps is separate and working to update it on the fly, and then just building a sort of presentation layer on top of that, which would be used by themes, might be a good approach. But at the moment, I'm happy with the way things are. But I'll be interested to see, especially things like the REST API. I think that'll be a massive step forward when it comes into more widespread use.
Yeah, didn't earlier today Matt sent an email out to a survey to see what else would you like to happen in WordPress and stuff like that. Did you get that email?
I didn't know.
Oh, okay. There's a link to the survey. I can put it out later.
There's an article on WP Tavern. Was basically asking visitors as well. Was basically asking, what do you want to see in 4.4? I think Scott Taylor, who's the release lead for WordPress 4.4, had also posted on the make.wordpress blog as well, saying, what do you want? I won't kind of spoil the surprise, but if you have a look on the WP Tavern article, there's certainly a lot of consistencies. On the make.wordpress blog, there's a lot of consistencies between what people want. The REST API was one of the top ones on there, and there's a few other bits as well. So have a look through and see what people fancy the look of. Unfortunately, what I wanted on there was nobody else had mentioned, so I didn't bother mentioning it.
No. So what you'd say are the benefit of Genesis to developers?
I think what I like about Genesis is that it's all of this stuff that I'd normally have to spend time coding is in there already. So things like a really nice loop, a way to create a custom loop really easily. The fact that I don't have to then go and create a million templates when something is really simple and can be accomplished really easily. I also like the sort of security aspect that it's obviously had a more sets of eyes on it than I could give a starter theme to accomplish the same. It's got that sort of pedigree that there's been quite a lot of history there and quite a lot of development, and there's going to be continued improvement as well, which is something that's really important.
And what do you think the benefit of Genesis is to your clients?
I guess recent times have seen the sort of accessibility stuff come to the fore, which has been a massive benefit in terms of making websites DDA compliant and making things more accessible. In other ways, I guess clients like things like layout options, where rather than having to select from a set of templates, they can click a really nice icon that then they can move the sidebar to the left or to the right. It gives options without sort of having a lot of complex code behind it. It's a really simple way of working, which clients can appreciate, I think. Also things like archive settings, where you can have a really nice SEO title and description on your archive is a really handy feature as well. I think it's more benefit to me than it is to clients, but obviously there's some good parts in there for them too.
And for these themes you're developing, are you considering accessibility, internationalization, localization, and right-to-left scripts when you're creating them?
Yes. Although a lot of the features that I am working on, things like left to right and translations, I'm relying a bit on Gulp to do that for me. So while I'll write the code, it'll probably be automation that takes care of generating the files. Stuff like the Genesis accessibility features, though, all of those are going to be on by default and in use. I know I had a couple of issues removing the skip link classes, the screen reader text and stuff, because there are a couple of places where it might be nice to have switchable screen reader text class for maybe showing the search label and things like that. But for the most part, that's sort of front and center at the moment. It's making sure everything's accessible and all of those features are in use.
Great stuff. Did you catch Genesis Camp last month?
Yes, I did.
And what presentation did you enjoy the most?
I liked David Wang's short piece about using transients, caching transients. That's something that appealed to me. But also I quite enjoyed Tanya's presentation about the sort of code standards and code quality as well. It was quite good. But I think overall the weekend was fantastic. It was really good to be a part of and to watch on.
Yeah, I really must get some time and actually look at some of the videos of the ones that I didn't catch, because obviously over 24 hours couldn't stay awake all day. And do you prefer www or non-www for your domains? If you're setting up a new domain.
Non-www for me.
Okay. So that's the end of the quick fire round. Gary?
Yep. If you've got any questions, we've got about 10 minutes left to go. So if you've got any questions for Craig, then hit us up on Twitter or carrier pigeon or some instant message. Just get it to me. You know how this works. So get those questions to us and we'll get them asked in the next 10 minutes. Going back to almost sort of kind of the start, though, talking about your business. Did you? We said you've not got a kind of an actively business website. How do you kind of get across to potential clients, basically without a lack of visible portfolio?
Well, while I've not been online at the moment, a lot of the work heading my way is through sort of word of mouth and through sort of reputation in a way. Especially working locally, it's quite a small community, and once you're known to be a really good web designer or developer, you're going to find that people are sort of moving roads towards you. I do have a number of websites I've developed and show as sort of portfolio pieces, but a lot of the time I think the benefit to customer is that rather than getting a website that needs a lot of further follow-up work or has to then be dependent on them coming to me to make changes, I love that WordPress gives them the sort of the control of things, so they can come to me and have a website built, but I'll spend time sitting with them and showing them how things work and how to edit this and how to do that. And I think that sort of builds more trust in me, that I'm not expecting them to come back every month or every couple of weeks that they want something added or removed. And it means that they they see the value of having the website that they've got and how it's going to work well for their business.
Yeah. Do you prefer having kind of your local clients or kind of clients further away, or does it just not make any difference to you?
It doesn't really make a difference. A lot of the time it's good if it's a local business and they're going to be actively using the website. It's really handy if I can go and sit with them and work through how this works and show them the back end and how things are edited and added. It's a lot more straightforward doing that face to face or in an office with a group of people, and then back and forth by email or screen share or whatever, where obviously the time zones and schedules and things. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have kind of fixed hours that you try and work to during your working day, or how do you avoid distractions?
It's quite high on the list. I've Slack minimised, Twitter minimised, but a lot of the time it's enough to know that I've a project that needs to be finished and I need to focus on that, and I can just sort of get in the right frame of mind to sit and work on it. In terms of working hours, I'll probably work 8:30 till maybe 4:30 daily, something like that, with an hour in between, and then any sort of small tasks that I can carry out in the evening, I might spend an hour here or there where I can.
Because I've certainly seen a few kind of commits go in from yourself at kind of 10:30, 11:30 at night, and
if I get to a sort of point where I think, yeah, I could carry that, I could get on that tonight, or I could do it. I'm the kind of person that once I've got a task that I really want to get done, I'm going to sit and work my way through it no matter how long it takes. If it's something that's been needing sort of on the list to do for a while, or if it's something that's been sort of puzzling me and I wonder how I'm going to do that, I'm going to sit and work my way through it, whether it means working until 5 o'clock at night or whatever. At the same time, though, I mean, that's offset the next day probably, so if I'm working for that time, I'm going to take a few hours off in the morning.
Late, yeah.
Recharge the batteries.
Do you offer maintenance contracts with your clients?
I do, primarily using MainWP for sort of overall view, but also things like individual backup schedules and things like that, where some of the clients that I am working for, obviously Aberdeen's quite prominent in the oil and gas industry, and they're quite sort of on the ball when it comes to backups and security and being proactive in terms of keeping things working properly.
Yeah. Question from Jackie says, do you use a core plugin that sits on top of Genesis, as Tonya suggests? Yes,
I do. And it more or less moves from site to site with me, so it's the same core plugin. Depending on exactly what's in that site, I have various includes which will be turned on or turned off, basically. So if there are custom widgets or if there are post types or whatever, uncommon in the line in the plugin file is going to include the logic for those.
Yep. Where did your name Designed To come from? And your logo?
The logo I did myself, but the name was quite catchy. It was quite good. Nothing better than that, to be honest. There's no real story behind it. I just thought that was a nice catchy name that would stick. Are
you a limited company, or are you kind of sticking as a freelancer, self-employed?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Sorry, just an individual at the moment, just sole trader.
Would you consider moving to a limited company? or have you considered?
If things grow to the point that that's a benefit, then yes. At the moment, things are fine as they are, but I'm happy to take advice from the see how it goes.
Joe, I know you've been at a limited company for a little while now. How, just kind of briefly, a few minutes before the end here, how has that been an advantage to switching over for you?
Well, the reason why I switched from a sole trader to a limited company, there was two reasons. One was someone registered the name I was trading under as a limited company, so that kind of had to rebrand. So I wanted to protect my name. So you can do that a little bit better when you're a limited company. And secondly, some of the clients I was working for made it clear that they would prefer to work with me as a limited company rather than as a sole trader due to their concerns around IR35. Yeah, it doesn't. Apart from that, it doesn't really make much difference. The accountancy fees are a little bit higher, but yeah, I quite like the limited liability. You know, owning a home and having kids and stuff like that. I quite like the idea that that's all protected.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I'm still self-employed sole trader. I haven't moved to a limited company. I know there are kind of good reasons why, and probably some logistics reasons why I haven't yet, but certainly it's on the radar to potentially move there. So.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of gotchas that you've got to be aware of. Is if you're going to move from sole trader to limited company, that if you're a mortgage advisor, if you're on the mortgage, is they won't take your sole trader accounts into effect once you've just started a limited company. They will only look at your limited company history. And if you've literally just done that and tried to redo your mortgage, then you're going to struggle to get a mortgage. So don't do that. And also what I didn't realise is when you move from sole trader to limited company, you can effectively sell the goodwill from your sole trader to your limited company, and then that's a tax benefit for later on as well. You can write that off over a number of years too. So that was quite a couple of things that were useful to know.
And if you want to see more, you can catch Joe's talk at WordPress London 2015.
2015 it was this year.
Yeah, early this year. Then if you look on WordPress TV, there's Joe's talk on there as well. I might mention that. So, Craig, we'll start wrapping up. Who would you most like to see on the podcast in the future? In your favourite podcast in the future?
I think Mike Little's a good shout. I know I said that in Slack last week. I think that would be a great guest if Mike wanted to come on.
Yeah.
So to sort of get his opinion on how WordPress has developed over the past 10 years or so since his involvement. So.
Yeah, Mike Little, one of the WordPress co-founders, along with Matt Mullenweg. Then, yeah, he's a UK-based person for folks who didn't know, and he's in the Genesis Slack channel. I can't remember if his main website actually uses Genesis or not. It might well do, but certainly he's in the Slack channel, so he obviously has used it at some point. So we'll catch up with him for that. Where can we find you online, Craig?
Primarily Twitter is a good way to find me. Like you said earlier, it's at Craig Simps. Slack, 24 hours. I'm on there most of the time. And also my website, which I said was design2.co.uk, which I'll pop a link to later.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so the guest in 2 weeks' time is Julia Sidnor, and Joe will be leading that interview, that podcast, and we'll have Paul Smart, who was one of our guests back from episode number 2, I think it was, who will be co-hosting that. I'm on a family holiday, so I'll leave you guys to it for that. Thank you very much for joining us today, Craig.
It's okay, guy. Thank you for having me, and thank you, Joe.
And thank you, Joe, for co-hosting as well.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
And to everybody else, thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions, and we'll catch up with you in 2 weeks' time. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.